No one understood the encrypted message until the silent waitress decoded it in calm, steady tones. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The room was filled with tension as the encrypted message flashed on the screen. Around the table sat the brightest minds in tech and finance, all with one thing in common. They couldn't crack the code. The message was a puzzle, a string of numbers and symbols that seemed impossible to decipher. A CEO with a fortune that could buy entire cities, a group of experts in coding and cryptography, and yet the message remained locked, taunting them with its complexity. Jack Anderson, the CEO, was growing impatient. The team of highly paid experts had tried everything: algorithms, brute force attempts, and even sophisticated encryption-breaking software. Nothing worked. "We're wasting time," Jack muttered, tapping his pen against the table. "Someone find a solution, or this entire deal is off." The pressure was mounting. Jack knew this message contained vital information that would make or break a billion-dollar deal. It was a matter of life or death for his company. The tech experts exchanged frustrated glances. They had tried every angle, and yet the message wouldn't budge. At that moment, something unusual happened. From the corner of the room, a quiet voice interrupted. It was her, Christina Matthews, the waitress who had been silently observing the whole situation from the sidelines. She had been working at the restaurant for weeks, serving meals, refilling drinks, but always keeping to herself. No one ever expected her to be anything more than just another server. But what no one knew was that Christina had a secret. She was more than just a waitress. She was a linguist with a knack for deciphering codes. Quiet and reserved, Christina had kept her talents hidden from everyone, choosing to work in the background while others took the spotlight. As she stood there, holding a tray of drinks, she noticed the problem immediately. The tech experts were going about it all wrong. The message wasn't meant to be solved with brute force or sophisticated algorithms. It was all about understanding the pattern, the language hidden within the symbols. Slowly, she approached the table. "I think I know how to solve it," she said, her voice calm and steady. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her. Jack raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Christina," she replied. "Christina Matthews. I'm just a waitress, but I believe I can help you with that." There was a moment of stunned silence. A waitress? In the middle of a high-stakes business meeting, this woman, who no one had ever bothered to truly notice, was offering to solve the puzzle that had eluded some of the best minds in the room. Jack leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "All right, go ahead. But this better not be another waste of time." Christina didn't hesitate. She walked over to the screen, her eyes scanning the cryptic message. She stood still for a moment, taking a deep breath, then began to speak in a language no one expected to hear. Her voice was calm and steady, the words flowing effortlessly as she translated the encoded message. The room was silent, as everyone watched in awe. With each word Christina spoke, the code slowly began to unravel. The pieces fell into place. Jack's eyes widened as he realized she was right. The message wasn't just random symbols. It was a complex pattern of language, a hidden code waiting to be unlocked by the right person. As Christina finished decoding the message, she turned to face the group. "There you go. The information you need is all there." The tech experts were speechless. They had spent hours, even days, trying to solve the message. And yet, it was Christina, a waitress, who had cracked the code in a matter of minutes. Jack stood up, staring at her in disbelief. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice low. Christina smiled quietly. "I'm a linguist," she said simply. "I've been trained to recognize patterns in language. Sometimes, it's just about seeing things differently." The room was still for a moment, as everyone processed what had just happened. Jack felt a mix of shock and admiration. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated the quiet ones. "You just saved the deal," Jack said, his voice filled with newfound respect. "I owe you one." Christina nodded, her expression unchanged. "Just doing my job." But deep inside, she knew that this moment was more than just a job. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected people can change the course of history. And with that, the room slowly returned to normal, but everyone knew that things would never be the same. Christina had not only decoded a message, she had earned their respect. And perhaps, in a way, she had decoded something far more important: how to be seen, how to be heard, even in the quietest of ways. Christina Matthews stood in the middle of the conference room, the hum of conversation fading into silence as the weight of her actions settled around the table. Jack Anderson, the CEO who had been dismissive only moments earlier, stood at the head of the room, his expression a mixture of awe and curiosity. The tech experts were still processing what had just occurred, their minds reeling from the fact that a simple waitress had solved the problem they had spent hours, if not days, wrestling with. "That was impressive," Jack finally said, his voice low but filled with genuine respect. Christina, however, didn't seem to acknowledge the praise. She simply nodded, her calm demeanor unwavering. "It's just a pattern," she replied softly, "a matter of seeing what others don't." The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for some further explanation. But Christina didn't offer one. Instead, she glanced at the clock on the wall, noting that her shift was almost over. "If you'll excuse me," she said, turning to leave. "I have to get back to work." Jack watched her walk away, her simple uniform a stark contrast to the high-powered executives who had just been in the midst of a high-stakes meeting. There was something about her that intrigued him. She had come out of nowhere, a quiet force in a world that was anything but quiet. As Christina made her way back to the restaurant's floor, the weight of the moment still lingered. She had known, deep down, that the encrypted message wasn't just a puzzle to be solved with technology. It was a test of perception, a test of attention to detail, something she had honed during her years of studying languages and code in her spare time. What no one in that room knew was that Christina wasn't just a waitress trying to make ends meet. She had once been at the top of her class in linguistics and cryptography, but life had pulled her in a different direction. Family obligations, financial struggles, and the weight of responsibilities had forced her to leave it all behind. And now, here she was, serving tables in a restaurant, her once promising future reduced to a series of mundane shifts. Yet, as she walked back to her station, a small part of her couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more. As she picked up her tray and approached the next table, the conversation from the conference room still echoed in her mind. Jack Anderson had been different from the other customers she had served. There was a depth to his words, a curiosity that went beyond the superficial. Most people in his position would have been content to dismiss her as just another waitress. But he had seen something in her, something that no one else had. He had recognized her intelligence, her insight, and that was a rare thing. As the evening wore on, the usual rhythm of the restaurant took over. The clinking of dishes, the murmur of conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter filled the air. But for Christina, everything felt different now. She had been part of something bigger, something that stretched beyond the confines of her daily life. When her shift finally ended, she collected her things and headed out into the cool New York night. The streets were bustling with people, the city alive with energy. Yet, despite the movement around her, she felt oddly still. She had just cracked a code, solved a puzzle that even the brightest minds had failed to unravel. And yet, she wasn't sure what to do with that accomplishment. Should she go back to her quiet life, the life where no one knew what she was capable of? Or should she take a chance, embrace the opportunity that had been presented to her? The thought of returning to the world of finance, the world of algorithms and codes, seemed both exciting and terrifying. But deep down, she knew that she couldn't let this moment slip away. Her mind raced as she walked toward the subway, her thoughts bouncing between the possibility of a new life and the fear of failure. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the empty street, a rhythmic beat that matched the pace of her thoughts. It was then that her phone buzzed. A message. She stopped in her tracks and pulled it out. It was from Jack Anderson. "I need to talk to you. Tomorrow. I have a proposition." The message was simple, but the implications were clear. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. Her heart raced as she stood there on the sidewalk, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had spent so long hiding in the shadows, too afraid to step into the light. But now, for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, something that had been dormant for too long. She could feel the pulse of the city around her, the hum of opportunity, the potential for something new. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid to take that step. Tomorrow, she would meet Jack Anderson. Tomorrow, she would face the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, she would finally take her place where she truly belonged. The next day, Christina Matthews found herself standing in front of the sleek glass building that housed Anderson Capital. Her heart raced as she stared up at the towering structure. The building loomed over her, a symbol of everything she had once dreamed of but had abandoned years ago. She had never imagined she would be standing here, about to meet with Jack Anderson, the billionaire CEO who had unknowingly sparked something in her last night. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag and took a deep breath, pushing aside the doubts that threatened to cloud her mind. This was her chance, her opportunity to reclaim a part of herself she had buried. As she entered the building, she was greeted by a receptionist who looked at her with a raised eyebrow, clearly questioning whether she belonged in such an upscale environment. "Christina Matthews to see Jack Anderson," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. The receptionist hesitated for a moment before typing her name into the system. "You're on his schedule. Please take a seat." Christina nodded and walked to the waiting area, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling of being out of place in a room filled with polished furniture and shiny surfaces. She sat down, straightening her jacket, her mind racing with questions. What was Jack going to ask her? Was she really ready to step back into a world she had left behind? Her thoughts were interrupted when a man in a suit approached her. "Ms. Matthews," he asked, his voice polite but firm. "Mr. Anderson is ready for you." Christina stood up, following him down a hallway lined with glass-walled offices, each one more impressive than the last. As they reached the end of the hall, the man opened a door and gestured for her to enter. Jack Anderson sat behind a massive desk, his sharp gaze lifting to meet hers as she stepped inside. "Christina," he said, his voice carrying a tone of recognition and something else, something like curiosity. "Please have a seat." She sat down in the chair opposite him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jack studied her for a moment before speaking again. "I want to thank you for what you did yesterday. You saved us from a potentially disastrous mistake." Christina didn't say anything right away. Instead, she met his gaze, her eyes steady. She wasn't looking for praise or validation. She had done what needed to be done. "It was just a pattern," she said softly. Anyone who understood the basics of cryptography would have seen it. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You make it sound so simple. But you did something no one else could." He paused, clearly weighing his next words. "I need someone like you on my team." The offer hung in the air between them, and Christina felt a jolt of surprise. She had expected a conversation, maybe a few questions about her background, but she hadn't expected him to offer her a job. "I'm not sure I understand," she said, her voice betraying a hint of hesitation. "You want me to work for you?" Jack leaned forward, his expression serious. "Yes, Christina. I've been in this business for years, and I've seen a lot of people come and go. But there's something about you, something that sets you apart. You're not just another employee. You think differently. You see things others don't. And I need that." Christina's mind raced as she tried to process what he was saying. She had left the world of finance behind for a reason. It hadn't been an easy decision, but it had been the right one. She had given up everything for the sake of her family. She had put her dreams on hold. But now, Jack was offering her a chance to step back into that world, a chance to reclaim a part of herself she had lost. "I'm not sure if I'm the right person for this," she said slowly, her voice uncertain. Jack's gaze softened. "You're exactly the person I need. I know you've been through a lot, but that's what makes you stronger. You've got the skills, the intelligence, and most importantly, you've got the courage to do what others won't." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "I can offer you a position as a consultant. You'll have the flexibility you need, the freedom to work on your own terms. No one's going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. But I promise you, if you join us, you'll be part of something big, something that will change everything." Christina sat back in her chair, her thoughts a whirlwind. It was tempting. The offer was everything she had ever wanted. But it also terrified her. Could she really step back into that world? Could she really face the challenges, the expectations, and the pressure that came with it? She had spent so long in the shadows, trying to forget who she had been. Could she go back to the person she used to be? Could she handle the risks? Jack seemed to sense her hesitation. He stood up and walked around the desk, standing in front of her. I know this isn't an easy decision, but think about it. This is your chance to make a real difference. You're not just another cog in the machine. You'll be part of something that matters. Christina looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. There was no going back now. She had already made her decision. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. Jack smiled, a look of genuine respect in his eyes. Welcome aboard, Christina. I knew you'd make the right choice. Christina Matthews sat in the corner of Jack Anderson's office, her fingers tapping nervously on the surface of the sleek conference table. The room around her was a stark contrast to the warmth of the diner she had once worked in. Everything here, every surface, every light, every detail, was meticulously polished, designed to impress. Yet, despite the luxury, Christina felt out of place. She had spent years living a life that kept her out of the spotlight, working quietly in the background. Now here she was, in a world of high stakes, and everything felt like it was happening too quickly. The door opened, and Jack entered the room with a confident stride. He looked every bit the billionaire CEO, his tailored suit a perfect fit, his gaze sharp as ever. Ready to get started? He asked, a slight smile on his lips. Christina gave a small nod, trying to push aside the nerves that were threatening to overwhelm her. She had agreed to this new role, but she had no idea what to expect. I guess so, she said quietly, her voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. Jack raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on her tone. Instead, he motioned to the computer screen in front of her. This is the project we're working on, he said, as the screen flickered to life, displaying a series of complex financial models and investment opportunities. We need to analyze the data, figure out where the biggest returns are, and do it quickly. The deadline is tight, but I'm confident you'll find the patterns we've missed. Christina leaned in slightly, her eyes scanning the numbers and charts that appeared on the screen. Despite the unfamiliarity of the environment, something about the data felt familiar. It was a puzzle, just like the encrypted message from the day before, just like the codes and languages she had spent years studying. It's all about patterns, she murmured under her breath. Jack glanced at her, catching the words. You're thinking differently, he observed. Tell me what you see. Christina hesitated, then began pointing at the screen. These numbers aren't just random, she said, her voice gaining confidence. They follow a trend, an emerging market trend. This particular investment option looks undervalued because the global demand for renewable energy is rising faster than expected. If we act now, we can secure a significant position in the market before it explodes. Jack listened intently, his eyes narrowed as he processed her analysis. That's exactly what I need, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. You're seeing the future, not just the numbers. Christina felt a surge of pride at his words, but she quickly tamped it down. This wasn't about her, it was about the job. Still, there was something satisfying about seeing her insights recognized, especially in a world she had once thought was beyond her reach. As the hours passed, they continued to analyze more data, working together in an unspoken rhythm. Jack asked questions, probing deeper into Christina's analysis, and she answered with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering the craft. It was as if the quiet waitress had disappeared, replaced by the skilled consultant who had been lying dormant all along. But as the meeting wore on, Christina began to feel the weight of her new role. She was no longer just the quiet observer. She was now the one making decisions that could impact millions. The pressure was unlike anything she had ever experienced, but it also felt exhilarating. By the time the meeting ended, the sun had long since set, casting a cool glow over the city. Jack stood up and walked toward the door. You've done more than I expected today, Christina, he said, his voice warm but professional. You've proven yourself to be a valuable asset to this company. Christina rose from her seat, her legs a little stiff from sitting for so long. Thank you, she replied, though she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much she didn't know. I'm just getting started, she added, more to herself than to him. Jack turned and smiled, his gaze shifting to the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. You have no idea what's coming next, he said cryptically. But if today is any indication, you're going to be more than just a consultant. You'll be a key player in this company. As he walked out of the room, leaving Christina alone with the glowing screen, she took a deep breath, feeling both a sense of pride and an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. She had always wanted something more. She had always wanted to prove that she could do more than just serve food. But now that she was here, in this high-powered world, the question remained. Was she ready for what came next? The path ahead was unclear, but Christina knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back. She had stepped into a new life, one filled with challenges and possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, she felt alive with the potential of what she could achieve. Christina Matthews sat at her desk in the sleek Anderson Capital office, staring at the numbers on the screen in front of her. The hum of the office seemed distant as she focused on the data, trying to piece together the patterns that could make or break the next big investment. She had been here for 2 weeks now, working as a consultant for Jack Anderson, and every day brought a new challenge. The work was intense, but she thrived on it. It felt like she had finally found a place where her skills and experience mattered. But as much as she had proven herself to Jack and the team, a part of her still couldn't shake the feeling that she was an outsider in this world. She had spent so many years in the shadows, working in the background, that even now, when she was finally at the forefront, it felt like a dream she wasn't quite ready to accept. She was a waitress, for goodness sake. She had never imagined herself in a boardroom, surrounded by million-dollar deals. Her mind wandered to the moment when Jack had first offered her the job. The look in his eyes had been one of admiration, but also a hint of something else. Was it respect? Or was it just a recognition of her value in solving problems no one else could? Christina wasn't sure. But one thing was for certain. She had to keep proving herself. She couldn't afford to let the doubts creep in. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and endless analysis. Jack and the rest of the team began to rely on her more and more. They sought her out for her insights into the market, her ability to see patterns in the data that others missed. The more she worked, the more she felt like she was slipping into a role she had always dreamed of. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a key player in a company that held the power to change industries. But with that power came responsibility. Christina wasn't naive. She knew that with every decision she made, lives and fortunes could be impacted, and that pressure weighed heavily on her. She couldn't help but think about her past, about the life she had left behind. The memories of her time at university, the dream she had once held of becoming a respected linguist and cryptographer, seemed so distant now. She had given it all up to take care of her family. She had made sacrifices, and in return, she had built a new life in a quiet corner of the world. But now she was back. She was back in a world where success and failure were measured in dollars, and she was no longer invisible. And with this new life came a new set of challenges. One evening, as she sat in her office, reviewing a set of financial projections, her phone buzzed with a message from Jack. "Can we talk?" it read. Christina's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen him since their last meeting, and the thought of speaking with him outside of work made her nervous. She quickly typed a response. "Sure. What's up?" A few minutes later, he called her. "Christina." Jack's voice came through the phone, steady but with a hint of something else. "I need to discuss something important. Can you meet me in the conference room in 20 minutes? Christina's mind raced. What could he possibly want to discuss? She had been doing her job well, better than she had ever hoped, but there was always that lingering doubt. "Of course," she replied, trying to sound calm, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She stood up from her desk and walked down the hall to the conference room, her footsteps echoing in the otherwise quiet office. When she entered, Jack was already there, standing by the window, looking out over the city skyline. He turned as she walked in, his expression unreadable. "Have a seat," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. Christina sat down, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. "I've been thinking," Jack began, his tone serious. "You've done incredible work for us, more than we expected, but there's a bigger opportunity on the table now, and I want you to be part of it." Christina frowned. "What do you mean?" Jack walked over to the desk and sat down. "There's a new project, a huge one, and I need someone who can analyze the data, understand the risks, and make the right decisions. It's a big responsibility, and I think you're ready for it." Christina's pulse quickened. This was the moment she had been waiting for. This was what she had always dreamed of, the chance to prove herself, to step up and take control of her own future. But with that excitement came fear. She had never been one to back away from a challenge, but this was different. "It's a big step," she said, her voice wavering slightly. I don't know if I'm ready. Jack's gaze softened. I know it's a lot to ask, but I believe in you. You've shown us that you think differently, that you have what it takes to succeed. This is your chance to truly make a difference. Christina took a deep breath, weighing his words. She had spent years doubting herself, hiding from the world, but now, the world was asking her to step forward. Was she ready? Was she willing to take that leap? After a moment of silence, she finally spoke. Okay, she said, her voice steady now. I'm in. Jack smiled, his eyes bright with approval. I knew you'd say that. And with that, Christina Matthews officially became a part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. The challenges ahead were great, but so were the possibilities. She was no longer just the waitress who had cracked a code. She was a woman with a future she could shape, a future she was ready to embrace. Christina Matthews sat in the corner of her new office, the soft hum of the air conditioning barely noticeable as she reviewed the latest data on her screen. The room was quieter than usual, and she felt a strange calm as she adjusted the lens through which she now saw her life. A few weeks had passed since she took the leap and accepted Jack Anderson's offer, and the weight of her decision had only intensified. She was now part of Anderson Capital, a key player in a company that had the power to influence industries, and yet, every day, she felt like an outsider in this world. It was all moving so fast. The work itself was exhilarating. Every day brought new challenges, new puzzles to solve. But with those challenges came a growing sense of responsibility. Jack had entrusted her with critical decisions, and each one could send ripples through the company. With every passing day, she felt the pressure increase. At first, she had been thrilled to be part of such a high-powered team. But now, the weight of expectation felt almost unbearable. She was working long hours, analyzing financial models, negotiating deals, and pushing herself beyond the limits she had ever imagined. Yet, despite the long hours and the stakes, there was something missing, something she hadn't expected to feel in a place like this. She missed the simplicity of her old life. It had been years since she had felt truly connected to something that wasn't about money or success. The quiet moments of the past, working at the diner, where the world seemed smaller and the stakes more personal, seemed like a distant memory now. Christina leaned back in her chair, her fingers pressed lightly against her temple as if trying to massage away the tension. She had always been good at math, good at patterns, but this was more than just numbers. It was the human element that made her question whether she had made the right choice. She could see it in Jack's eyes. His confidence in her had been unwavering, but she was starting to wonder if she had made a mistake, if she was really cut out for this. But then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jack. We need to talk. In my office now. She stared at the screen for a moment, trying to suppress the anxiety that crept into her chest. It had been a while since they had a one-on-one meeting, and she couldn't help but feel that this time, it would be different. She grabbed her bag, straightened her jacket, and walked down the hallway towards Jack's office, her footsteps echoing against the marble floors. As she entered, Jack was standing by the large window, looking out over the city. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a sense of urgency. Christina, come in, he said, gesturing toward the chair in front of his desk. Have a seat. She sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. What's going on? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jack turned to face her, his expression serious. I've been thinking about the project we've been working on, he began. There's been some tension in the team. Some of the analysts aren't happy with the direction we're taking. Christina's heart skipped a beat. She knew the stakes had been high, but she hadn't realized just how much tension had been building behind the scenes. What's the issue? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Jack walked around the desk, his hands clasped behind his back. There's been a disagreement about the investments we're making in renewable energy. Some think we're moving too fast. Others think we're not moving fast enough. There's pressure from both sides. Christina nodded. She had noticed the growing division among the team. So, what do you want from me? She asked. Jack met her gaze. I want you to be the voice of reason here. You've got the skills. You've got the vision. I need you to help bring everyone together and make sure we're moving in the right direction. Christina took a deep breath. This was what she had been afraid of. The pressure, the weight of making the right decision for everyone. It wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about managing people, their expectations, and their fears. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. "You've already proven yourself, Christina. You've cracked codes that no one else could, and you've brought valuable insights to the table. Now, I need you to take that same approach to the team. We're all in this together." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, she felt like she was back at the diner, working quietly in the background. But this time, she wasn't invisible. "Okay," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I'll do it." Jack smiled, his usual confidence returning. "I knew you'd say that." As she walked back to her desk, Christina felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't just solving financial problems anymore. She was learning to navigate the complexities of people, their hopes, their fears, their egos. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was what she had signed up for. The city outside the window seemed a little less overwhelming now. The world was still big, but maybe, just maybe, she could carve out a place for herself in it. Christina Matthews had barely settled into her new role when things started moving faster than she could keep up with. After her conversation with Jack in his office, she had spent the past few days working tirelessly to help bring the team together. She analyzed data, sat through endless meetings, and became the bridge between two factions within the company, the aggressive risk-takers and the cautious strategists. As the days blurred together, Christina found herself waking up earlier, staying late into the night, and barely finding time to breathe. But it was all worth it. The company was on the brink of making one of the biggest investments in renewable energy the industry had ever seen, and Christina was at the heart of it. The pressure was intense. Every decision, every insight, seemed to carry more weight than she had ever imagined. But with each passing day, she became more confident in her abilities. She was learning to navigate the complexities of high-stakes decision-making, and she was starting to trust herself again. That was until she received a call that threatened to undo everything she had worked for. It was late in the evening, and she was reviewing the latest projections for the renewable energy project when her phone buzzed on the desk. Jack's name flashed on the screen. She quickly answered, her heart racing a little faster than usual. "Christina, I need you to come to my office. Now." Jack's voice was serious, and Christina could tell something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, already standing up and grabbing her jacket. "Just get here, please," he said, before the line went dead. Her mind raced as she walked toward Jack's office. What could it be? Was something wrong with the project? Had one of the analysts made a mistake? The possibilities seemed endless, and each one made her stomach tighten. When she arrived at his office, Jack was pacing back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear. He waved her in as soon as he saw her, and she immediately noticed the tension in the room. Jack ended his call and set the phone down, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of frustration and concern. "We've hit a major roadblock," he said, his voice heavy. "There's been a leak. Someone has gotten access to our project details, and now, the media is involved." Christina's mind spun. A leak? How could that happen? They had worked so hard to keep everything under wraps, to avoid the kind of scrutiny that would threaten the success of the project. "Do we know who it is?" she asked, her voice calm despite the storm brewing inside her. Jack shook his head. "Not yet, but the press has gotten hold of the story. And now, competitors are circling. They're trying to steal our deals, undermine everything we've built." Christina felt a sharp pang of anxiety. If this information got into the wrong hands, it could destroy everything they had worked for. The success of the project, the future of the company, everything was at risk. "What do we do?" she asked, trying to steady her breathing. Jack ran a hand through his hair. "We need to find out who's behind it. Fast. I need you to work with our security team, dig into the data, and see if you can trace the leak." Christina nodded, though she felt a sinking feeling in her chest. She had never dealt with something like this before. She had solved financial models, analyzed trends, and even cracked codes, but this felt different. This was about trust, and the threat of betrayal was something she wasn't prepared for. "I'll get on it right away," she said, trying to hide the unease in her voice. Jack's gaze softened. "I know you're under a lot of pressure, Christina, but you're the only one who can handle this. I believe in you." His words, though supportive, only increased the pressure she felt. She was the one who had been chosen to solve this problem. But what if she couldn't? What if the leak was too deep to fix? Christina spent the next several hours combing through the data, working closely with the security team to track down the source of the breach. It wasn't easy. Every layer of the company's network seemed impenetrable, but with every piece of information they uncovered, Christina grew more determined. By the time the sun began to rise, they had a lead. It was subtle, buried deep within the system, but Christina had found it. The leak had come from an internal source, someone within the company who had access to the project details. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment of truth. She had to confront the person responsible. She made her way to Jack's office, the weight of the news hanging heavy in her mind. When she told him what she had found, his face hardened, and for the first time, Christina saw a flicker of anger in his eyes. "We'll deal with this," he said, his voice cold. "Thank you, Christina. You've done what no one else could." Christina nodded, but her mind was still reeling from the implications. Betrayal. It was a word she had never expected to associate with her new world. As she left Jack's office and walked back to her desk, the reality of the situation began to sink in. She wasn't just solving financial problems anymore. She was now part of something much bigger, and with that came a new set of dangers. She had learned a lot in the short time she had been with Anderson Capital, but nothing had prepared her for this. And now, she realized, nothing would ever be the same again. Christina Matthews had spent days working with the security team, tracking down the leak that had threatened the company. The tension in the office had reached a breaking point. Every moment was filled with uncertainty. Yet, as each hour passed, she felt a new sense of purpose driving her forward. The discovery that the leak had come from within the company had shaken everyone to their core. It wasn't just the competitors who were the threat. It was someone from their own ranks. As she walked through the corridors of Anderson Capital, Christina's thoughts were consumed with the implications. Trust was everything in business, and now that trust had been shattered, she had learned a lot in the short time she had been with the company. But this was a whole new level of betrayal. The person responsible wasn't just a nameless face in the crowd. They were someone she would have to confront. The next step was clear: find out who had betrayed them and deal with the consequences. Jack had promised to handle the situation with the utmost professionalism. But Christina knew that this was more than just a business decision. It was personal. She arrived at Jack's office, a knot tightening in her stomach. The door was slightly ajar, and she pushed it open, stepping inside. Jack was at his desk, his back to her. He turned when he heard the door open, his expression unreadable. "Christina, come in," he said, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it that made her pause. "We have a lead," he continued. "The leak is coming from one of our senior analysts, Daniel Westbrook. We've been watching him for days, and it's clear now that he's the one responsible." Christina felt her heart drop. Daniel? She had worked with him on several projects. He had been one of the first people to make her feel welcome when she joined the team. The thought that someone she had trusted could betray them so deeply was hard to grasp. "How do you want to handle this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "We need to confront him, but we need to do it carefully. We can't let this leak spread any further. We need him to confess, and then we'll take the appropriate legal action." Christina nodded. "What do you want me to do?" Jack's gaze softened. "I need you to be the one to talk to him. You're the one who's been tracking the data. You know the ins and outs of this project better than anyone. I think it'll be more effective if you're the one to confront him." Christina took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had never imagined herself in a position like this. She wasn't just solving problems or analyzing data anymore. Now, she was tasked with confronting someone who had betrayed the very company she had worked so hard to be a part of. "Okay," she said, her voice firm, even though her mind was racing. "I'll do it." Jack stood up and walked around the desk, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know this isn't easy, but you're the right person for the job. You've already proven yourself." His words gave her a moment of reassurance, but they didn't erase the anxiety gnawing at her. Confronting Daniel wasn't going to be easy. She had worked alongside him for weeks, and the thought that he could be the one behind the leak felt like a betrayal on a personal level. Christina left Jack's office and made her way to Daniel's workspace, the weight of the task ahead heavy on her shoulders. When she reached his desk, she saw him hunched over his computer, oblivious to her presence. She stood there for a moment, taking in the sight of him. He was focused, as always, but something about him seemed different. "Now," She couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to uncover something she wouldn't be able to unsee. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady but firm. He looked up, startled, before quickly composing himself. "Christina," he said, offering a forced smile. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath, her mind racing with everything she had learned. "I know what you've done," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. Daniel's expression faltered for a split second, but he quickly recovered. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice a little too calm. "I'm talking about the leak," Christina replied. "I know you're the one who's been leaking our project details." Daniel's face paled, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his confident facade. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. "We've been tracking the data, Daniel," she continued, her voice unwavering. "We know it was you." There was a long silence between them, and Christina could see the internal struggle on Daniel's face. Finally, he looked down at his desk, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't want to," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But I needed the money. They promised me a cut if I gave them the information." Christina felt a wave of disgust wash over her. She had never expected to hear those words come out of his mouth. "You sold us out for money?" she asked, her voice shaking with anger. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he simply nodded. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice small and broken. "I didn't know what else to do." Christina's heart hardened as she looked at him. The betrayal cut deeper than she had imagined. "You've betrayed us all, Daniel. And now, you'll have to face the consequences." She turned and walked away, leaving him behind, knowing that the company's future, and her own, would never be the same again. Christina Matthews walked out of the conference room, the weight of her confrontation with Daniel still fresh in her mind. The betrayal had hit her harder than she had expected. She had thought she knew what kind of person Daniel was, someone who worked hard, just like her. But now, everything seemed tainted. The thought of how quickly he had turned on the team, sold them out for money, made her question everything about the work she had come to love. The clock on her desk ticked loudly in the silence of her office, each second echoing the turmoil in her chest. She had never been naive, but this was different. This wasn't just about numbers or data, it was about trust. The thing that had always motivated her was the belief that what she was doing mattered, that she was part of something bigger. But now, the stakes felt much higher. The success of the project was in jeopardy, and worse, the very foundation of the company's integrity had been shaken. As she sat there, trying to gather her thoughts, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack. "We need to meet. Please come to my office." Christina knew the drill. Every meeting with Jack had always been important, but this one felt different. She took a deep breath and headed to his office, her mind a whirlwind of questions. When she entered, Jack was standing by the window, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, casting a soft orange glow over the skyline. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Come in, Christina," he said, his voice calm, but with an undertone of urgency. She stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. "You found out, didn't you?" she asked before he could say anything else. Jack didn't answer right away. He motioned for her to sit down, and she obeyed, trying to mask the anxiety she was feeling. After a moment, Jack spoke. "Yes, we found out. The leak was worse than we thought. Not only did Daniel share sensitive information, but it seems he's been working with a competitor. He's been feeding them insider knowledge for months." Christina felt a chill run through her. The idea that Daniel had been betraying them for that long was a gut punch. "How did we not see this coming?" she asked, her voice quiet. Jack sighed, his gaze turning to the floor for a moment. "We were so focused on the technical side of the project, we didn't pay enough attention to the people behind the scenes. We trusted him because he was one of us." He paused, and when he looked up, there was a hardness in his eyes. "But that's over now." Christina nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Jack had been right. This wasn't just about a project anymore. It was about loyalty, betrayal, and the future of the company. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice steady. Jack leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Now, we make sure Daniel pays for what he's done. We're working with legal to ensure he faces the consequences. But beyond that, we need to rebuild. The team needs to trust each other again, and we need to make sure something like this never happens again." Christina's mind raced as she processed everything Jack was saying. Rebuilding trust wasn't going to be easy. It was going to take time, effort, and a lot of hard work. But if they wanted to come out of this stronger, it was something they had to do. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice softer than before. Jack looked at her, his expression softening. "You've done more for this company than anyone could have expected. You're a key part of this team now, Christina. I need you to stay focused. We need your skills, your insight. The work you've done has been invaluable." His words were a comfort, but they also came with the weight of responsibility. Christina had proven herself, but now, she had to carry the team forward. There was no going back. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, determination in her voice. Jack smiled, and for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. "I knew I could count on you," he said, and that small gesture made her feel like she was part of something bigger than herself. As she left Jack's office, Christina felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, but it didn't feel as heavy as it had before. She had a job to do, and she wasn't going to back down. The road ahead would be difficult, but she knew that if they worked together, they could rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't going to be easy, but Christina was ready to face whatever came next. This was her time to prove not just her skills, but her strength and her loyalty to the people she had come to call her team. And with that, she stepped back into the fray, ready to take on the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that she had what it took to see them through. Christina Matthews sat at her desk late into the night, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she reviewed the latest reports. The tension that had filled the office just days ago had begun to dissipate, but the weight of the betrayal still lingered in the back of her mind. She had helped expose Daniel's leak, but there were still so many questions. How could someone she had worked with, someone she had trusted, betray them all so completely? The thought gnawed at her, distracting her from the task at hand. She pushed it aside, focusing on the numbers in front of her. She had a job to do, and she couldn't afford to let personal feelings get in the way. The renewable energy project was still on track, but there were risks. The press was beginning to circle, and competitors were trying to capitalize on the situation. The company needed to act fast, and Christina was determined to help them succeed. She had already proven herself once, and now she had to prove it again. She had to stay focused. As she worked, her phone buzzed with a text from Jack, "Meeting tomorrow at 10. We need to discuss strategy." Christina set the phone down, rubbing her tired eyes. She was exhausted, but she knew this meeting would be crucial. They had to make the right moves to stay ahead of the competition and protect the company's interests. At 10 the next morning, Christina walked into the conference room, her mind sharp despite the lack of sleep. Jack was already there, along with several members of the executive team. They looked up as she entered, and Jack gave her a nod of approval. "Christina, glad you could join us," he said, motioning for her to take a seat. She sat down, her posture straight and confident. Jack wasted no time getting to the point. "We've got a lot to cover today. The press is breathing down our necks, and we need to make sure the competition doesn't take advantage of the leak. Christina, I want you to head up the internal review. We need to make sure we've closed all the gaps, and we need to communicate with the team to rebuild trust." Christina nodded. "I'll get started immediately," she said, her voice steady. Jack turned to the rest of the team. "We've got to be transparent with our stakeholders. We can't let this mistake define us, but we also can't let it derail our entire project. We've worked too hard to get here." Christina could feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She wasn't just leading the internal review. She was the one who had to restore the team's faith in each other. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was determined to make it happen. As the meeting continued, Christina focused on the next steps. The first priority was to secure the project's future. They needed to ensure that the leak hadn't compromised their data, and they needed to regain the trust of their investors. But there was something else she couldn't ignore: the team's morale. The company's success wasn't just about numbers. It was about people. And right now, those people were hurting. As the meeting ended, Christina stayed behind to talk with Jack. "I'm going to need your help on this," she said, her voice low. Jack nodded. "Of course. Whatever you need." "It's not just about the leak," she said, her gaze focused on the floor. "It's about making sure this team stays together. We've already lost one person, and I don't want to lose anyone else." Jack studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I understand. I'll support you in any way I can. We'll get through this together." Christina felt a surge of gratitude toward Jack. He had been her mentor, her guiding force throughout this whole process. And now, She was beginning to understand that her role wasn't just to solve problems, it was to lead. She had to be the one to set the example, to show the team that they could overcome anything if they worked together. Over the next few days, Christina worked tirelessly. She met with the security team, the analysts, and the legal department, ensuring that all the pieces were in place. But she also made time to speak with the rest of the team. She encouraged them, answered their questions, and reassured them that they were still a vital part of the project. Slowly but surely, the morale of the team began to shift. People started to believe again. The sense of betrayal was still there, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been. Christina had shown them that there was hope, that they could still make the project a success. By the end of the week, the company had come together. The leak had been contained, and they had secured their position in the renewable energy market. The competition had taken a hit, and Anderson Capital was once again in control of the situation. Christina sat at her desk that evening, looking out over the city skyline. She felt a sense of accomplishment, but it wasn't just about the project. It was about the people she had helped, the trust she had rebuilt, and the lessons she had learned along the way. The work wasn't finished yet. There would always be new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But Christina knew she was ready for whatever came next. She had found her place in this world, and she wasn't going to let anything stop her. Christina Matthews stood at the edge of the balcony, staring out at the city below. The lights of New York twinkled in the distance, casting a glow that felt both comforting and distant. It had been a month since the internal crisis at Anderson Capital had been resolved. The leak was contained, the team had begun to heal, and the project was progressing. But something still nagged at Christina. She had stepped into a world she once thought was beyond her reach, and now, more than ever, she was starting to wonder if she truly belonged here. She had proven herself over and over, solving problems no one else could, but the pressure was relentless. The weight of the company's future rested on her shoulders, and there were days when it felt like too much. She had learned to trust her instincts, to lean into the skills she had spent years developing. But there were moments, like tonight, when the weight of responsibility seemed overwhelming. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Jack Anderson standing in the doorway, his usual confident expression softened by a hint of concern. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Christina stepped aside to let him in, offering a small smile. "Of course." Jack walked out onto the balcony, standing beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city stretched out before them, the hum of the streets below a reminder of the world they were trying to change. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "You've done a remarkable job, Christina," he said, his voice low. "I know things haven't been easy, but you've kept us on track. You've been more than I could have ever hoped for." Christina glanced at him, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm really cut out for this." Jack turned to look at her, his gaze steady. "You've more than earned your place here. You've proven yourself time and time again. But I can see it, Christina. You're carrying a lot on your shoulders." She nodded, looking out at the skyline again. "It's hard not to. There's so much at stake. I've never been in a position like this before. It's one thing to analyze data and solve problems. It's another to make decisions that affect people's lives." Jack's expression softened, and he stepped a little closer. "I get it. But you're not alone in this. You never have been. We're a team. We succeed or fail together." His words were reassuring, but Christina still felt a sense of doubt. She had come so far, but the fear of failure lingered in the back of her mind. She had always been the one in the background, quietly solving problems. But now, she was in the spotlight, and it felt like there was no turning back. "I know," she said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But sometimes I wonder if I've made the right choice. There's so much pressure. What if I can't handle it?" Jack gave her a small, understanding smile. "Pressure is part of the job, but so is knowing when to lean on others. We all have moments of doubt, even me. But what matters is how we rise above it. You've got what it takes, Christina. I've seen it from the beginning." His words were comforting, but the nagging feeling that she wasn't enough still lingered. "I just don't want to disappoint anyone," she admitted. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "You won't. You've already done so much. And you've earned the trust of this team. That's something not everyone can say." Christina felt a sense of warmth spread through her. She had spent so much time questioning herself, wondering if she could really do this. But Jack's words made her realize that she had already proven herself. And perhaps that was enough. The weight of the world didn't have to rest solely on her shoulders. She was part of a team that believed in her. She wasn't in this alone. As the night stretched on, Christina and Jack continued to talk. The conversation shifted to the future of the company, the next steps in the renewable energy project, and the challenges they would face in the coming months. The more they talked, the more Christina realized that the fear she had felt was starting to fade. She was no longer a quiet observer in the background. She was an active participant in something bigger than herself. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The city lights continued to flicker in the distance, but Christina no longer felt lost in the vastness of it all. She was part of this world now, and she was ready for whatever came next. As Jack excused himself and left the balcony, Christina took one last look at the city below. The uncertainty was still there, but so was the determination. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to stop now. Whatever the future held, she was ready to face it head-on. Christina Matthews sat at her desk, the soft glow of her computer screen the only light in the darkened office. The day had been long, filled with countless meetings and strategy sessions. The renewable energy project was moving forward, but it wasn't without its challenges. The company was pushing forward with more urgency, but the pressure was beginning to take its toll. Christina could feel the weight of the responsibility more than ever. She had made it through the crisis with Daniel's betrayal, but now, the real work began. The team was starting to look to her for leadership, and despite her best efforts, the doubts were creeping back in. She wasn't just an analyst anymore. She was leading the charge. She had never imagined herself in this role. She had been the quiet observer, the one who solved problems in the background. But now, as the leader of the internal review and key player in the project's success, the stakes were higher. She had to make decisions that would impact the future of the company and the team. As the minutes ticked by, Christina's mind raced. She had been wrestling with the company's next move. Jack had asked her to take charge of communications with investors, but she wasn't sure she was ready. She had learned a lot, but handling the pressures of leadership felt overwhelming. She had always been good at reading people, understanding the numbers, and solving complex problems. But this was different. This was about managing people's expectations, rebuilding trust, and keeping the company on track. She was no longer just analyzing data. She was the one making decisions that could change everything. A soft knock on her office door snapped her out of her thoughts. Christina looked up to see Jack standing in the doorway, his usual confident demeanor replaced with a more serious expression. "Got a minute?" he asked. She gestured for him to come in, setting her papers aside. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady, even though her heart was racing. Jack closed the door behind him and walked over to her desk, leaning against the edge. "I wanted to talk to you about the next steps," he began. "We've made great progress, but there's still a lot of work to do. I know the pressure is mounting, but I have faith in you." Christina forced a smile, but her mind was spinning. She had always trusted Jack, but now the weight of his expectations was adding to her stress. "Thank you," she said quietly, "but I'm not sure I'm ready for all of this." Jack's expression softened. "I get it. This isn't easy, but you've been handling things like a pro. You've got the skills, the instincts. You just have to trust yourself." Christina met his gaze, her heart pounding. She had always been good at solving problems, but leading the team felt different. There were so many moving parts, so many people to consider. It wasn't just about the data anymore. It was about people's lives, their livelihoods. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this," she admitted. "I'm not used to being the one making the big decisions." Jack smiled gently, stepping closer. "That's the thing, Christina. You don't have to have all the answers. Nobody does. The important thing is that you're willing to make the tough choices and lead this team to success. You've already proven yourself more than anyone else here." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She had spent so much time doubting herself, but now, for the first time, she could see the truth in what he was saying. She had earned the right to be here. She had worked hard to get to this point, and she had the skills to make a real difference. "I've got your back, Christina," Jack continued, "and I know you've got the team's." The sincerity in his voice was enough to calm her racing thoughts. She wasn't alone in this. She had the support of her team, and she had Jack's trust. It was up to her to prove to herself that she could lead. "Thanks, Jack," she said, her voice filled with new resolve. "I won't let you down." Jack gave her a nod of approval, and with that, he turned and left her office, leaving her with a new sense of purpose. As she sat back in her chair, Christina realized that the weight she had been carrying wasn't something to fear. It was a sign of how far she had come. She wasn't the same person she had been when she walked into Anderson Capital. She had proven her worth, and now, it was time to take the next step. The city outside her window stretched out, a world of possibilities waiting for her. She wasn't just part of the company now. She was shaping its future. With renewed determination, she turned back to her work, ready to face whatever came next. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for it. This was her moment, and she was going to make it count. The sun was setting over New York City, casting a soft golden glow over the skyline. Christina Matthews stood by the window of her office, her gaze lost in the sprawling city below. The hum of the bustling streets seemed distant now, as though the world outside had faded away. Her mind was focused on the journey she had taken to get here, the challenges she had overcome, and the lessons she had learned along the way. Just a few months ago, she had walked into Anderson Capital as a quiet, unsure analyst, overwhelmed by the weight of expectations. Now, she stood here, a leader, with the future of the company in her hands. It had been a roller coaster of emotions, from the shock of betrayal to the excitement of taking on a leadership role. But Christina had faced each moment with determination, with a quiet strength that had earned the respect of her colleagues and the trust of Jack. The road had been far from easy, but she had come out stronger on the other side. As she reflected on the journey, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jack, "Meeting in 10 minutes. We need to finalize the next phase." Christina smiled to herself. The work wasn't over. There was still so much to do, so many decisions to be made. But she was ready. She had always been good at solving problems, at analyzing data, at finding patterns. But now, she had learned something more important, the power of leadership. It wasn't about knowing all the answers. It was about listening, about bringing people together, about guiding them toward a common goal. Christina had learned to trust her instincts, to trust her team, and most importantly, to trust herself. As she walked into the conference room, she saw the familiar faces of her colleagues. They looked up as she entered, their expressions filled with anticipation. Jack gave her a small nod of approval. "Ready?" he asked. Christina nodded, her heart steady. "Let's do this." The next few hours were filled with discussions, decisions, and strategies. Christina worked with the team to finalize their approach to the next phase of the renewable energy project. They were ready to take the next step, to push forward with the plan that would not only secure the company's future, but also change the industry. When the meeting ended, Jack turned to Christina, his expression filled with pride. "You've done it, Christina. This is your moment. The team is behind you." She smiled, but it wasn't just the sense of accomplishment that filled her. It was the knowledge that she had earned her place here, that she had earned the trust of the people around her. The weight of responsibility still lingered, but now, it felt lighter. She was no longer the unsure analyst she had once been. She was a leader, a decision-maker, and someone who had proven herself. As she walked back to her office, Christina felt a sense of peace settle over her. There was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long time, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. The city outside the window seemed brighter, the future clearer. She had found her place in the world, and she was ready to shape the future, not just for herself, but for the company and the team she had come to care about. The journey had been long, but it had been worth every step. Christina Matthews had made her mark, and there was no turning back now.